Hey, what's up, everybody?
And welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 317. I'm your host, Kendall.
I'm your host, Josh.
Joined by our production team, Janelle and Ian.
Hello, everyone.
Today, guys, we're going to be getting into a case that I feel needs more attention. It's honestly insane that this case is still unsolved, that there is no justice, because when you hear the details, you're really going to be scratching your head as to why no one has been held accountable for what happened to Patti Adkins. Now, this case happened back in the early 2000s, and it's gotten a decent amount of coverage, like a couple
over the years.
Yeah, but it's been a while since they've gotten any attention on this case. And Patti was an awesome person, and what happened to her is truly just beyond sad, especially considering she was a mother and her daughter has had to grow up without her most of her life.
Yeah, it's extremely tragic. And, it's still, I'm trying to figure out why, based on all of the evidence that we'll present here, as well as the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. It baffles me that nobody's been arrested.
Yeah.
For what seems to be a murder.
Yeah.
Based on everything. But again, there's some other possibilities here because nothing has been confirmed yet.
Yeah.
Including the main suspect in this case has not even been named publicly by the authorities yet, which is crazy. So,
but his name is out there.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not going to say it because
people on the internet
you can
did
easily
some digging and found it. And again, it hasn't been confirmed by the authorities, so we don't know 100% if that person is actually the person that's being named, but it seems like all the circumstances and evidence point to this particular person being involved in her disappearance.
Yeah, of course, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but I think when you hear the details...
Yeah, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
What are we doing here?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the disappearance of Patti Adkins.
Okay. So Patricia, or Patti Adkins, was born on May 4th, 1972 near Marysville, Ohio. Now, not much has been reported about her early life, unfortunately. Normally, it's kind of nice to connect with victims a little bit more in that way and hear a bit more about their upbringing and kind of what led up to this. But we do know that she had a brother and two sisters, Marcia and Jeanine, with whom she was very close with both of them. And Marysville itself is a pretty small town in Union County, Ohio, and only had a population of 27,157 even in 2022. Marysville is a classic blue-collar American town with industrial roots spanning from the 1800s. And by the time that Patti lived there, most people were employed by one of the various car manufacturing plants, and only 5.4% of the population lived below poverty line. It was a factory town where you could earn a living and support your family even from an early age, which is exactly what Patti did. After graduating high school, she began working at the Honda plant. And her sister Marcia was always impressed by her and her ability to, quote, work her way to the top. Patti had, come in at the bottom, and within only a few years, she was already a shift supervisor. She was very driven and just
hardworking.
Yeah, hardworking and smart. And Patti was absolutely beloved by her fellow employees. And even though she worked the second shift at the plant that ended around midnight, she would always stay late to inspect the workstations and clean up and make sure everything was ready for the following morning. When Patti was 22, she married an unnamed man, and the two of them had her only child, a little girl named McKaylee. And while the marriage ended soon after, Patti always maintained a good relationship with her ex-husband, and McKaylee was given a pretty good childhood. Patti really tried to spend every spare moment that she had with her. She took her on vacations, and they also spent a lot of time with her family members who lived close by. Patti was also extremely good with money. Even though her job with Honda didn't pay, exceptionally well, she was comfortable and lived savvy enough to have saved over $100,000 through her time at the plant, which is pretty impressive. And she had more assets between her 401k and her house that she owned and raised McKaylee in. For the first 7 years of McKaylee's life, Patti was, pretty comfortable. Jeanine said that Patti was very happy most of the time, that she had an infectious laugh and would get everyone in the room laughing with her. But still, since Patti's divorce, she didn't have very many romantic interests. Marcia, who only lived 30 minutes away from Marysville, would speak to Patti pretty much daily on the phone and hear about any potential loves in Patti's life. But Patti was, for the most part, just dedicated to her child and to her job and didn't want to compromise on either for a man. She was, just really independent and happy to be that way, which is why Marcia found it kind of strange. And she was a little bit surprised to hear that Patti had a new boyfriend over Thanksgiving of 2000.
So as we mentioned earlier, police have never released the name of Patti's boyfriend. And for the sake of this episode, we're going to give him a name, and that name is Bob.
Bob.
Yeah. Let's talk about their relationship a little bit. Patti had started a pretty emotional relationship with Bob earlier that year or late 1999. And because of the nature of the Honda plant, you would often see the same people every day, even if they didn't work the same assembly line as you did. Bob and Patti had been coworkers for several years and were playing cards together on breaks or before and after shifts. The two immediately felt a connection and were soon romantically involved. Bob also owned an auto repair store on the side and constantly spoke to Patti about buying out his portion of the business and moving with her to the country where they would have more kids and raise them together. Patti became deeply involved with Bob, fell in love with him, and she believed that he loved her too. There was only one small detail though. Bob was married with his own kids. And for obvious reasons, Patti was pretty hesitant to tell Marcia this fact. She had already talked about how amazing he was, but how could an amazing man cheat on his wife? Patti said that Bob's marriage was unhappy and that he wanted to divorce his wife, but he couldn't because he owned the auto repair shop with her and her brother. If he wanted to divorce his wife, he would have to buy out his section of the business. Which is that, how do you feel about that being a valid reason?
I mean, I think it's you guys know the concept of like a shut up ring. I think that's that's what takes place before the shut up ring is like, okay, I'm just gonna no, I can't divorce her yet because, we own this business together. She's going to take me for all it's worth, and that just eventually when that goes away, although that didn't happen in this case, but then he would eventually just give her a ring to shut her up. I don't think he was really that emotionally involved with, at least as much as Patti was involved with him.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've actually never heard of that, a shut up ring.
Mm-hmm. Just, even though, again, obviously that didn't happen with them, but it's just because of the way he's constantly stalling with her through this auto shop bullshit.
Yeah.
I think that, if their relationship did continue, he would just eventually marry her just to stop the questions.
Yeah.
As time went on, they really tried their best to keep their relationship secret from everybody. The only people that Patti told were her sisters, her best friend, and a close friend at the Honda plant. The relationship was almost entirely emotional, and they mainly kept it to their breaks at work. Things only got physical a handful of times when Patti would book an appointment at Bob's auto repair shop. But still, the relationship had been going on for a while now, and Patti wanted things to become serious. When Bob asked if she could loan him money to help him buy his way out of the business, Patti said yes.
Which just really shows her commitment to him.
Yeah, or just what a good manipulator Bob is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think he's definitely, he's got to be charismatic enough to kind of manipulate her and also lead her on, thinking that, they're talking about moving to the country and having kids together. So she's envisioning, as Ian was saying, eventually marrying this man and having this whole life with him. Mm-hmm. And so he's taking advantage of that in order to lead her where he wants to go.
Mm-hmm. But for her, as someone who was so smart with her money to go ahead and just loan him money,
it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it really shows you how invested she was.
Yeah. When it comes to the money, Bob's instructions are pretty strange. He didn't want checks or wire transfers because, of course, he doesn't want any paper trails. He only wanted cash from her. And on one hand, we can excuse this because he and his wife had joint accounts, and he obviously didn't want her seeing money being withdrawn or money coming in. Why would that matter if he planned to buy his way out, is the question.
I don't think it would matter. If that was the end result, I mean, if he's trying to buy his way out so then he can divorce her, maybe that could excuse it because he's like, oh, I need to keep it a secret, yada, yada, yada. But I don't know. I feel like if he's planning to buy his way out, he could just tell her that beforehand.
Yeah.
And that amount of money coming in wouldn't really matter. Also, if he was actually planning to buy his way out, why he wouldn't be able to do that with cash, most likely, you know?
Yeah. And we say excuse that as in try to make sense of it, not excuse it, because obviously what he was doing to his wife was pretty fucked up too. Although we've got to consider, and we'll get into that later on, whether she possibly knew about that. But also, you know, I personally believe that it was other reasons, paper trail and other things that could have possibly been already on his mind in the plans.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just the sheer amount of cash that Patti would end up giving Bob is pretty crazy and is a ton of money to just have laying around in cash.
People, these days, there are just so many things out there that you can be subscribed to. So many subscriptions, so many trials, so many apps, so many services, and it gets overwhelming. And if I were to ask you how many active subscriptions you have, would you be able to tell me? Probably not. I mean, I thought I had a good idea until I started using Rocket Money, and I was severely mistaken. And did you know that you can actually end up paying twice for subscriptions without even realizing it? Well, all of that is over if you start using Rocket Money, because they're able to find your subscriptions, tell you exactly what you got going on, and then cancel the ones you don't want anymore with just a couple app taps. You don't even have to deal with customer service, because I feel that's a big reason a lot of people avoid canceling subscriptions or trials or whatever it is. So you don't want to have to deal with them begging you to stay or making it extremely difficult to cancel. The fact that Rocket Money just takes care of it for you is such a game changer. Now, if you haven't heard of Rocket Money, it's a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and even helps you to lower your bills so you can grow your savings. And Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. You can easily create personalized budgets with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. You'll be able to see your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money is going. And they can even give you alerts if bills increase in price, or if there's unusual spending activity maybe, or you're close to going over budget. And the new goals feature automatically saves money for you without you even having to think about it. And Rocket Money will even try to negotiate to lower your bills for you, sometimes up to 20%. They automatically just scan your bills to find opportunities to save, and then you can ask them to negotiate for you, and they deal with the customer service. Now, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. So stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/milehigher. That's rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Once again, rocketmoney.com/milehigher.
Patti ended up emptying out her savings, liquidating her assets. She borrowed from her 401k and even took out a loan with the Honda Credit Union that she banked with. And altogether, Patti took out nearly $90,000 between 2000 and 2001. So that's a big sum of money.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't just giving the money to Bob. She had to start making payments on the loans and the 401k in July of 2001, and she told Bob that he would have to start paying her back then as well, which is strange because why wouldn't he try to buy his way out of the business before then? You know, why hasn't he started that process? Why hasn't he drawn up the paperwork and, you know, setting up the financing to do it? None of that's happening.
Mm-mm.
But even with the financial deadline, Patti felt strongly for Bob. They often said, "I love you" to one another, and Patti would write him love letters that she would pass to him while they're at work. She also bought him gifts, too, including a Harley-Davidson phone and a Hard Rock Cafe shirt while she was with Marcia in Miami.
We were all talking about the Harley-Davidson phone, too.
There's Harley-Davidson branded everything.
Really? A phone?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Harley-Davidson vehicles. They have all sorts of knickknacks with the Harley-Davidson logo on it and stuff. Did you think it was like a motorcycle phone, like on the motorcycle?
That's what it looks like from what I'm... Do you see this?
So she bought him a phone for his motorcycle?
It literally looks like... No. It looks like it's an actual motorcycle.
Yeah.
That's a phone. Oh, I was picturing just like a flip phone with a Harley-Davidson logo printed on it or something.
That's what I was picturing too.
Yeah.
Well,
we got to go back further to the early 2000s before cell phones.
This is true.
very fancy
collector's
cell phones.
item. Phone works. Wow, they're still selling these on eBay.
So this was hooked up to like a landline.
So like a cool kind of like thing for his office.
Yeah,
probably.
to like put on your desk or something.
Yeah.
So as you're probably wondering, Marcia did not fully approve of Patti's relationship with Bob, but Patti had always made the right choices. She had given a good life to McKaylee, had been very responsible, and this was the first guy that she felt serious about since her divorce. So Marcia trusted her sister and her decisions, even if she couldn't entirely understand them.
Because at the end of the day, she just wants her sister to be happy and,
Yeah, and it's definitely seems a bit sketchy, but, you're not going to jump to like worst case scenario or crazy conclusions at this point.
And she said in one of her interviews, she just chose not to judge her, and I totally get that. There's a boundary, there's a line where in hindsight, maybe you would have crossed, but you don't want to overstep, with your sibling.
Yeah, it can backfire.
Yeah.
Create a divide between you. And,
definitely.
If you are suspicious of somebody that your loved one's with, the last thing you want to do is create a divide during that time. So you kind of have to walk this fine line of like supporting them while also trying to advise them the best that you can without causing problems.
Yeah.
But still, by July 2001, with the payments looming, Patti and Bob hadn't spent an extended period of time together, which is why Patti was excited when Bob offered to take her on a week-long vacation to his remote cabin in Canada.
And obviously, if you follow true crime, I think, when you hear remote cabin, things come to your mind. So the Honda plant always had this yearly shutdown from June 30th to the 8th of July to give their employees, time off with their families to celebrate the 4th of July. And this is when Patti and Bob decided to plan their getaway. And Patti had called her sisters in the days leading up to the trip to sort of fill them in on their plan. And then on June 26th, Bob had purchased a new tonneau cover for his pickup truck. And he usually drove a different car as his, everyday vehicle. And then the pickup truck was used as his work truck. On June 29th, 2001, he installed the cover and drove it to work.
I just wanted to, just in case people don't know what a tonneau cover is.
Yeah, please, because I actually did not know before.
So a tonneau cover, on a truck bed is normally open, right? Open to the elements. Usually people buy tonneau covers to protect items in the truck bed from either being stolen or the elements when traveling.
Out.
Yeah, or just flying out. It secures whatever's in the bed underneath it, but it lays flat on top of the bed. It doesn't have like a topper where there's like, you could get in, there's headroom above where the bed ends.
Yeah.
And obviously there'll be pictures if you're watching, so you know what that is. But this kind of is important, especially in the details we're about to go over, because it doesn't really make any sense.
No. So Patti told Marcia that she would drop McKaylee off with her father for him to watch her for half of the week, and then Marcia would watch her until Patti returned home on Sunday, July 8th. Patti told Marcia that the cabin was in a very rural area and that she shouldn't expect, a phone call from her or anything like that until she returned home to Marysville.
That's concerning.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was a red flag for her.
But also you got to consider this is early 2000s and...
True. Yeah, there's not 5G coverage,
No. And then this is really weird. Bob also told Patti not to pack any clothes and that they would buy all new clothes once they were there.
The fuck?
Yeah, it's very strange.
That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, if it's like a vacation, when you're going to like a city or something, like, we've had trips where we packed a little lighter because we've wanted to go shopping once we're there. But why for a trip like this, when you're out in the middle of nowhere where there isn't even cell service, this rural area, like how many shops are there? Which of course we don't know for sure. Maybe there was great shopping around there, but it's very peculiar to tell her, don't bring any clothes.
It's not like they're going to Aspen or something,
right?
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Where there's a remote cabin and then in town there's a bunch of stores to go to. This is what's weird to me. So I go back to why buy a tonneau cover if you're not going to bring hardly any luggage with you?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of a tonneau cover is to keep whatever's in the bed covered and safe from the elements or from being stolen. But if you're not planning on bringing virtually any luggage, because most of your luggage when traveling is what? Your clothes.
Yeah.
So that to me was like, what's going on here? That doesn't add up at all.
Well, he says he has other reasons for buying the tonneau cover, which we'll get to.
Sure, conveniently before you leave town with it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's odd.
You need
I
it for your
agree.
trip, but you're not bringing it. Like usually if you're going to buy it, you would like, why do it right before you leave town
Install
for your
it,
trip?
yeah.
Yeah. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So Bob carpooled to work that day with another coworker who lived in Kenton, Ohio, which is around 20 to 30 minutes from the Honda plant. And after they got off their second shift at midnight, Patti was to sneak into Bob's truck bed underneath the tonneau cover. And then after Bob dropped off his coworker, she would move to the passenger seat and the two would be whisked away to Canada. So right off the bat, super fucking strange. Why would you have your girlfriend who you apparently love so much that you want to make a future with her right in the back of the truck bed, and obviously this was because he didn't want his coworker to know that she was in the car.
But why not tell your friend, like, I can't take you home today?
Yeah, just
today's not
so
the day.
Weird. Yeah.
I wonder, I'm just like, that's crazy. And I'm sure like in that moment, it was just because they're trying to keep it secret and they didn't want this other person. But what's interesting is that seemed like most people at the Honda plant knew that there was something going on between them. So it was like, how much of a secret really was it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So was there really this like dire need to keep it under wraps if they were always seen together, flirting, talking, hanging out?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's strange.
Yeah, which we'll get more into. Another friend kind of gives some more insight into how it was like pretty well known around the plant that they were having some type of affair was going on. So super, super weird plan. And on the morning of June 29th, Patti called Marcia to confirm the plan, which she actually did tell her that, she was going to be riding in the truck bed and all of these strange details. But she also said that she would watch McKaylee from the middle of the week until she returned from Canada on July 8th. And they ended the call as they always did, which is super cute, and this breaks my heart. They would say, "Kiss, kiss, I love my sis." So then Patti drove to the vet to board her cats and her golden retriever for the week. And remember this part because it is important to note for later. And then Patti drove back home and she got dressed in her usual white Honda uniform for her shift. And although Bob told her not to pack anything, she did pack a duffel bag with a single piece of lingerie that she had just purchased from Victoria's Secret. And then Patti's friend from the plant drove Patti to Honda that day, and her name is Heidi Knight. And she was the only person at Honda who Patti had actually confided in about her relationship with Bob. But Heidi said, like we mentioned earlier, that it was pretty much an open secret. People constantly saw them flirting throughout the factory, and they knew something was up between the two of them. However, Heidi was the only one who actually really knew what was going on, was clued in on the details, and knew about the Canada trip. So Patti worked the second shift like she always did from the afternoon until midnight, and she told her team to clean up early so that they could leave the plant right at midnight, and the team certainly didn't mind this. I mean, they were happy to leave a little bit earlier than usual and start their shutdown, beginning their week vacation as soon as possible. And again, while they were aware of her affair with Bob, they did not know that she planned to leave with him that night. And 19 seconds after midnight, earlier than Patti would ever normally leave for her shift, she left the Honda plant. And midway through the week, Marcia picked up McKaylee from Patti's ex-husband. And again, Marcia didn't feel like anything was wrong. Patti said that she wouldn't have service and she shouldn't expect any communication with her until she returned home.
However, on Sunday, July 8th, Marcia got worried when Patti didn't pick up McKaylee by noon. So she called Bob's house, pretending to be a potential client, and his wife picked up and told Marcia that he was out of town and should be back soon. This made Marcia feel better, although temporarily. Perhaps the two were still on the road and would be home shortly. But then 4 hours later, Marcia still hadn't heard from Patti. So she drove to Patti's house to check to see if she was there. Maybe she just wasn't getting back to her. So when she got there, she found Patti's Honda Accord in the garage and all of her personal items were completely undisturbed. Marcia knew neither Patti nor anyone else had been in the house since she left. Marcia then called Bob's house again, and this time he picked up. She told him who she was and that she knew about their relationship and plan, and Bob responded by saying, quote, "Patti from Honda?" And he just was playing dumb, acting like he had no idea about the trip or the affair, acting like he barely knew who she even was. Marcia then hung up, called her brother, and told him, quote, "Patti's dead."
Yeah, that gives me chills. She just like knew right away.
At 7:15 p.m., Marcia filed a missing persons report with the Marysville police. The first place the police searched was Patti's home. And while Marcia had been there the day before and said she didn't really notice anything out of the ordinary, Marysville police officers opened her closet to find tons of empty bands used to wrap cash. From the numbers listed on the wrappers, police estimated they once wrapped an estimated $90,000. Marcia confirmed that Patti had been giving Bob money in the hopes of him being able to buy out his portion of the business, but Marcia had no idea how much Patti had taken out to support him in this decision. A forensic accountant went through Bob's accounts to see if there was any evidence that he directly received the money. Not only had all of Patti's phone and bank activity ceased since June 29th, but there was no traceable evidence that Bob ever deposited the cash into his account. There was no large withdrawals or deposits, no money or additional bank accounts open, nothing. And some have theorized that he may have offshore bank accounts where he deposited the cash, but this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for a couple of reasons. For one, while the forensic accountant couldn't have looked through those statements, he could know at least if Bob had any offshore accounts. For two, this was cold hard cash, and if he wanted to deposit the money into the offshore account, he would have had to make a money order, which would be traceable, or literally ship the cash to the country of the account to be counted and deposited. And again, we're talking about a middle-class guy who worked as a mechanic and a factory line assemblyman. So would he have gone through all these steps? We're not really sure. But that evening, Marcia called Bob's house again. He and his wife were on the phone this time with her, and Marcia told them everything about the affair, the trip, the money, anything to try and convince the wife that her husband had done something to Patti. But Marcia said that the wife didn't sound sad or the least bit surprised that her husband had been engaged in an extramarital affair. That must have been just crazy for her, thinking that if I expose this guy, that she's going to be like, what?
Yeah. She was just like, oh.
And maybe help out the situation. And she just doesn't even respond, it seems like.
Very sketchy.
And so obviously this was extremely frustrating, and Marcia ended up just hanging up and never spoke to them again. And so I think a lot of people think, well, does she know something? Did she already know all of this? Mm-hmm. Is she a part of this plan possibly to essentially extort this money from Patti?
Would not be surprised.
We don't know for sure.
No,
but
of course we don't know.
One can wonder.
Seems that way.
The next day, July 9th, Bob and his friend were brought in and questioned for the first time by police. Bob denied any relationship or involvement with Patti. He said that after he and his friend got off of work at around midnight, they went to Burger King, and then he returned to his home in Kenton at around 2:30 a.m. on June 30th. Again, his house is in Kenton, which is only about 30 minutes away from the Honda plant in Marysville. So what could have taken the two so long to get home? Well, Bob explained that they had waited in line at the Burger King for 45 minutes. Which that is a long time for a late night trip to Burger King. So the police obviously wanted to check out to see if this story made any sense. So they contacted the owner of that Burger King, who revealed that they only did $18 of business from midnight until 2:30 a.m. the night Bob was there. The longest anyone would have to wait would be 10 to 15 minutes. So what was going on? Now, maybe they were doing something else at the Burger King parking lot that took them, this amount of time, and they just didn't want police to know about it. Some have speculated that maybe they were smoking weed in Bob's truck, and they really did hang around the Burger King for 45 minutes. But even if we do take his claim of 45 minutes at Burger King as legitimate, there is still an additional 45-minute gap in his story between leaving work, getting food, and then driving home. And that's not like a small chunk of time. That's actually quite a bit of time we're talking about. So who really knows what they were doing? Yeah, you could just hang out there at Burger King late at night and, nobody's around and just smoke weed, I guess, and just talk or whatever. But with the circumstances and, where's Patti? You know what I mean? That's the big question.
I cannot tell you how much I hate shopping. I hate the mall. I hate the dressing rooms. And even when I can figure out my size in a store, it's all so different. It's hard to figure out what to actually shop for. Sometimes stores don't even have my sizes in stock. And that horrible dressing room lighting, like I said, it just feels like a personal attack. So I am much more of an online shopper. And that's why I love Stitch Fix, because shopping and figuring out your style can be really overwhelming. And when it comes to getting dressed, sometimes I don't even know where to start. That's why I love having a Stitch Fix stylist. She really knows what works for me, especially because I've been using Stitch Fix for so long. She really understands what I'm going to like and what I'm not going to like, what's going to make me look good, what I'm going to feel confident in. I just give my stylist my size, my style, and my budget preferences, and I order boxes when I want and how I want, no subscription required, and they send me just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations as well and styling tips, which I could really use that because, to be honest, friends, I don't really have that great of a sense of style. I keep what I love and I send back the rest. It could not be easier. They literally send you a pre-labeled bag that you are able to put anything you don't want in and then just put it in your mailbox, send it off. It could not be easier, friends. And the best part, like I said, no stores, no crowds, no stress, just personalized looks that you'll love, and Stitch Fix makes it so easy. I've been personally using Stitch Fix for years now, paying for it myself. It's truly a service I recommend. It's personal styling for everyone. So get started today at stitchfix.com/milehigher. That's stitchfix.com/milehigher. So police end up questioning Bob about his plan with Patti and asked him if he purchased the tonneau truck bed cover specifically so that Patti could hide inside while he drove his friend home. And he denied this. He said that he bought it for an upcoming fishing trip that he took later into the shutdown week, which is where he was when Marcia called his house for the first time. However, for an unknown reason, he took the tonneau cover off of his truck just a few days after Patti's disappearance. Pretty fucking weird. And he didn't even end up using it for the fishing trip, which really makes no sense. It's unclear if the police questioned him on why he removed the cover, but yeah, just, again, doesn't make any sense. Why would you say that you bought it for the fishing trip and then you took it off just a few days after installing it and before the fishing trip even occurs?
I smell bullshit here.
Yeah,
like this is
I think we all
he's just
smell
a
it.
terrible liar.
Yeah, he is. And that's why it's like, how has he not been held responsible yet? Oh, it's so frustrating. So the next thing that police did was administer a polygraph test to Bob and his friend as well. And the questions surrounding Patti included, were you involved in an extramarital affair with Patti Adkins? Did you have a trip planned with her to Canada? Do you know where she is? Things like that. And while his friend passed the lie detector just fine, police indicated that Bob, quote, showed deception in his answers. However, we don't know which, answers or questions
failed,
exactly that he failed or caused the polygraph to spike. Then on July 13th, Bob consented to a search of his property by police with cadaver dogs. Now, Bob's property consisted of his house and another structure that was part of his auto repair shop that he owned. Bob had been using concrete to extend certain areas of the driveway and just dumped the excess concrete over a spot near the structure. And obviously this immediately tripped the cadaver dogs, and, police as well thought it was very strange that he is just pouring.
Yeah, people don't usually do that.
No.
But if he's just doing it himself, potentially, and he doesn't care about appearance of his property,
yeah,
may not be that big of a deal. I've seen
but
people
why
do
not
that
just
before.
get rid of it? Why put it down?
Just didn't want to deal with it? I don't know.
They asked him when he poured the concrete, and he said that he did the other day. So it was very fresh, and the police were confused. If you have this excess mixed concrete, why would you just dump it on the ground? Like we just said, they were also questioning that. It didn't make any sense unless Bob was using it to cover something. So they ended up digging up the freshly poured concrete and unfortunately found nothing. He had just dumped all this excess concrete on this seemingly random spot on his property for whatever reason.
Laziness, probably.
Yeah,
just
I
didn't
guess.
want to take it somewhere.
It's just a weirdo.
Probably mixed too much and then just had excess and just was like, well, what do I do with this? You can't just throw it in the trash, right? Because it's already mixed concrete.
So. I don't know. So odd. Now, it's important to note that the cadaver dogs may have been tripped by something else. There was a shovel next to the concrete, and this shovel perhaps could have had a trace of Patti or someone else's scent on it as well. Not really sure there. Wish we had some more information. But
yeah, we don't have a lot of information about what testing was done forensically by the police or what was the extent of their investigation other than kind of these main points.
Yeah.
And we don't know if maybe they have done more and they do have additional evidence that they gathered from his property and they just haven't publicly talked about it yet. But
or they just straight up didn't do it.
Or they didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So next, the police searched the inside of the house. And again, Bob's line the whole time was that he knew Patti as an acquaintance, but was not close with her and was definitely not her lover. However, police were able to find some evidence that showed otherwise. For one, the police were able to find that Hard Rock Cafe shirt and that Harley Davidson phone that Patti had purchased for him while on vacation with Marcia. And Bob's wife claimed that she had never seen the shirt before in her life. In addition, the police were able to find a love letter written to Bob by Patti. Now, obviously, Bob's like,
yeah,
well,
how do you
explain
deny?
that
Be
away?
like, oh, I don't know her. She's just a random woman giving me love letters. Like,
well, that's kind of what he tried to say, actually. His story now changed to Patti's no longer just this random coworker that he knew in passing, but was a woman who was obsessed with him. He said that she would purchase him gifts even after he said no, and he tore up a birthday card that she had given him again. And this is a strange inconsistency here. Why would he tear up a birthday card but then keep the love letter?
yeah,
It's so weird. And again, Bob's wife denied knowing about any of this.
which is shocking that she doesn't know. She didn't know about this love letter. She didn't know about the birthday card.
No.
He's bringing this stuff into the house.
Yeah.
You would imagine maybe his wife would ask him about it.
I
Be
mean,
like, where'd you get it?
I
And
guess-
again, he could just be like, some random coworker gave me a gift.
And it's possible that she didn't actually see them, that he was hiding those things for her. Like, I am more, in my opinion, I think she knew about what was going on, especially from her call earlier with Marcia and just having no reaction, not acting surprised or sad in any way. But obviously, you've got to consider he could have been hiding some of these things for her, or maybe she just didn't care. Maybe their relationship was so, like, it was pretty,
It's
like almost platonic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Who really knows? It's
Maybe this
frustrating 'cause
isn't
we
the
really
first
don't know
time
a
this has
lot.
happened.
Yeah.
That's kind of what my thought goes to. Like, if we are to believe Bob's story that,
Yeah.
you know, that the relationship, the marriage was failing, you know, this probably wasn't the first time,
Right.
and it probably wasn't the last either. And at a certain point, his wife probably just like stopped caring, like regardless of if she knew about Patti's disappearance or anything.
Yeah.
Even if she knew about the affair, she just probably didn't care,
Yeah.
you know.
Or it's possible she knew about all of it and it was all a plan that the two of them made to get this money from her.
Right.
For their business that they have together.
Right. And I lean more towards that. And then the last thing that police could find was the removed tonneau truck cover from Bob's truck. And police identified cat hairs and a spot of blood on the cover, which they did test the hairs and they were able to trace them directly to Patti's cats. And remember, she had boarded her cats and her dog as well earlier that day. And that means that at some point, Patti absolutely came in contact with the tonneau cover between the time that Bob installed it on the 29th and the time he removed it later that week. So it doesn't really line up with some random coworker who's obsessed with him. You know, what is he going to try to say? Like, oh, she was so obsessed with me that she just jumped in the truck bed.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to believe.
No, just don't. It's such bullshit. However, that blood spot was simply too small to test with technology that was available in 2001. And police were worried that if they did try to run a test, it would fail and then the evidence could not be retested. Obviously, if you have such a small amount, oftentimes you can't test it more than once. So they packed it away until technology improved. Additionally, police interviewed a service manager at Bob's auto repair shop who said that he was confused as to why he would have purchased the tonneau cover in the first place. Since the pickup truck was primarily used as his work truck for hauling equipment, the cover would really only get in the way.
So even though Bob had a motive to kill Patti as he needed to start paying her back, a few weeks later, failed a polygraph test and police discovered the cat hairs, which directly linked Patti to Bob's truck bed. Police didn't feel like they had enough evidence to charge him with a crime. For one, there was a duffel bag Patti had packed with one piece of lingerie that was still missing, and without a body, police had no way of knowing how she was killed. While we can almost certainly cross out the theory that Patti willingly disappeared, because again, she had a happy life, she adored McKaylee, and was financially sound, other than the loans that she had taken out for Bob, there is a theory on how she was killed. With the cat hairs, we can assume that Patti hid in the back of Bob's truck after she got off work as planned. And then while parked at Burger King, Bob and his friend could have parked for 45 minutes while Bob left the car running and could have used a hose to siphon exhaust under the truck cover, which would have eventually killed Patti. And he could have left the vehicle running while parked in the garage later on, which would have had the same effect. That's another possibility.
Without even running the exhaust in.
Or just leaving it turned on in the garage. You know what I mean? So,
well, because Ian, you were,
Yeah, I mean, like we were discussing this earlier, and like you were even saying,
right,
you know, the tonneau cover is so airtight that it would eventually you would just suffocate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even more so, like I was talking to my dad about it, who used to drive pickup trucks, and he was like, I would never let you guys sit in the car while the exhaust was running, like sit in the truck bed, because just naturally that's where the exhaust will go.
Yeah.
You will end up breathing in those fumes. So you wouldn't even need a siphon.
Yeah, because even with the tonneau covers, there's usually small little cracks. So if exhaust was running, it would seep up underneath the vehicle into those cracks into the bed eventually. Either that or you would just run out of air if you were in there for hours and hours and hours.
And you can't get out from inside?
No.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to get out once the door is closed because you can't push up because the tonneau cover kind of locks down on top of it.
So it really seems like that really could have been what happened to her.
Possibly, which I think that would explain perhaps the lack of blood. That this wasn't necessarily a violent murder in the sense of like, you know, there's a lot of blood.
Mm-hmm. And even if that small blood they did find, we don't even know if it was Patti's.
Right. So that would make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. You think that was the plan?
But I'm really curious. I'm like, I assume they brought the cadaver dogs over to the truck, right? At some point. Maybe they didn't.
Well, I'm pretty sure they did. I'm pretty sure they did.
And so maybe they didn't pick up on anything, or maybe her body, once she was deceased, wasn't in there long enough for, you know, sort of
possibly
the smell to be there.
Or they just never brought the dogs to the truck.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really murky around what was forensically done, because you would think that there would be some. Because if you think about it, if Patti's trapped, there's going to be a point that Patti realizes what's going on. That the plan is not what I thought it was. If she's in there longer than what she was told, she's going to realize, like, I'm trapped in here.
Yeah.
I need to get out. And so you would think that through, and again, maybe not based on the circumstances and if there was exhaust in there or not, maybe she would have been rendered unconscious before she could try to like fight and push her way out of it. But I'm just thinking from like a DNA perspective, like they only found cat hairs and a drop of blood, and she was in the back there for potentially hours. That's kind of wild to me. I don't know. A summer or so ago, I had a medical issue pop up, and it was kind of all of a sudden, and I actually went to the emergency room for it. And luckily, it wasn't anything major. I was okay, but they recommended that when I returned home, because I was traveling, that I go see my primary care physician. So when I got home and started looking at my insurance, I realized that I had a primary care physician assigned to my account through my insurance, but I had never gone to him before. I had no idea who he was, what kind of doctor he was, or even where he was located. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go find a new doctor closer to where I live now. And I used ZocDoc in order to help me find the perfect doctor that got me fixed right up. I love ZocDoc. We use it all the time in our family for all different types of appointments, because that's a great thing about ZocDoc is you can find a doctor or physician for any issue that you have very, very easily. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you search and compare high-quality in-network doctors so you can choose the right one for your needs and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skin care, and much more. And what makes it so simple, it's honestly easier than using your insurance's website. I mean, those are so outdated, it drives me nuts. But ZocDoc, you can just filter by the need as well as the insurance that you have, and then boom, it'll show you physicians in your area that take your insurance that also have appointments. And sometimes those appointments can even be same day or next day. And it's just so convenient. Like I said, ZocDoc appointments happen really fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours after booking. I actually was able to get a same day appointment, which saved me and allowed me to go see a doctor who I actually see regularly now that I love, all thanks to the ZocDoc app. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/milehigher to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/milehigher. Visit ZocDoc.com/milehigher.
What do you guys think about the idea that maybe Bob didn't intend for her to die? Like, obviously there's definitely motive for a murder, and it would make sense. And I lean more towards it being a planned murder. But what if he's just that dumb and he was hiding her back there, didn't even realize that this could have happened and that it was an accident, and he just decided to cover it up?
I think that's a really plausible theory. I think it definitely could have happened. That maybe...
Think about.
But I go back to... It's hard to ignore the other evidence here of the money being taken from Patti.
Yeah.
The wanting to go to Canada, to his remote cabin.
Yeah.
To leaving all of your clothes behind because we're going to go. You know, he purposely told her to come with no belongings, essentially.
No, I agree.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking he wants less to have to get rid of, less evidence to have to get rid of once he does it. So for me, I feel like this is a premeditated plan. And as much as I think your theory could be possible, I just think because of the other circumstances in this case, this seems thought out to me and planned.
I think without the motive, I could lean more towards the idea of this being an accident, covered up accident. But yeah, with the motive there and all the steps he took ahead of time and then just denying it afterwards, I don't know. There's so many things. I think it was intentional.
I'm also curious, and I don't think we know this, if the police... And my guess is because of the time period, there probably wasn't video surveillance of the Burger King. But I'm really curious to find out if Bob was actually at the Burger King for as long as he said he was, because I think that would be a very telling piece of evidence here. If he was in fact sitting in the parking lot, was the vehicle on? Or was he not there? Maybe it was a quick 10-minute stop there and then he left. And where else did he go?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It could lead us to where Patti is, but we don't know if they actually were able to pull evidence from that, or they did and they're sitting on it because it's part of the case they're building. But
it's not that old. Yeah, they could just be sitting on it. But like, couldn't they confirm that he was there in some way? Why not release that? You know, receipts or talk to employees, or they've got to have internal cameras at least. Right? Wasn't that old. 2000.
I mean, that's I do kind of think like the police would have probably said, because again, they're in their public interviews, at least they say that the only way they can kind of put like a confirmed timestamp on it is by talking to the manager who said they only did $18 in business, and the most anyone would have to wait would be 10 to 15 minutes. So I think the fact that that's what they're saying kind of leans me more to like either they didn't have security cameras or the footage was deleted.
Or they weren't working.
Or they weren't
as
working.
It happens all the time.
As we always know.
This one is so frustrating.
But some other things to note are there's at least 10 lakes between Marysville and Kenton. And while we know police drained ponds near Bob's house and the Honda plant, we're unsure if they searched these larger bodies of water.
Probably not, because they would have, I think, made it public if they...
Yeah, totally. And Bob certainly could have passed these bodies of water on his drive home. And since Bob's friend passed the polygraph test, he truthfully might not have known that Patti was back there and may have no part in her death. And since Patti only had the clothes on her back in her duffel bag with that single piece of lingerie inside, it would have been very easy for Bob to get rid of her and all of her belongings. And while police have stated that this is a homicide investigation and that Bob is their main suspect, and again, they still haven't named him, so they say they have a suspect, but they won't say who. They simply do not believe that they have enough evidence in order to present it to a grand jury. Honestly, kind of crazy to me, because I feel like there's enough circumstantial evidence here that a grand jury would be interested enough to want to indict Bob and potentially take this to trial, but they don't believe so. So fast forward to 2019, Marysville Police Department was able to test that blood spot finally, and it came back indicating 2 profiles, and one was Bob and the other was unidentified. So unfortunately, their fear had come true, and it's unlikely that they'll be able to test the blood again. So they don't have a confirmation on what that other sample was or who it belonged to. And now the chance to retest it is virtually gone. But Bob quit his job with the Honda factory weeks after the investigation concluded, which is a bit weird. And it seems like all of his coworkers assumed that he had committed the murder and he needed to get away. He was trying to run away from everything.
Sure, it was not a great place for him to work after that.
Right. He now lives in rural Ohio and is still married to the same woman as far as we know. And it's unclear what happened to that $90,000 that Patti loaned to him. And it's also been reported that he has become a grandfather. But Patti's family had her declared legally dead in 2006 so her family could pay back her loans with her life insurance money. Marcia and Jeanine still miss their sister now, and they talk about her in the past tense. Jeanine said the hardest thing is that although she can remember Patti's face, she can't remember her infectious laugh, which is, absolutely heartbreaking.
Makes me want to cry. That's horrible.
As of 2018, McKaylee, Patti's daughter, was studying for her PhD in behavioral neuroscience, which is just badass, honestly. That's such a cool career field to get into. But as of 2024, she'll be 30 years old, 1 year older than her mother when she went missing.
Wow. She's definitely smart, just like her.
Definitely. But on a positive note, there are criminal attorneys that believe they have enough evidence to charge Bob with the murder of Patti Adkins in the hopes that more evidence will come during the trial. However, even though Detective Jeff Stiers believes Bob killed Patti, he also knows that they only have one shot at a conviction and want just one more piece of evidence to tie Bob to Patti's murder. Which I get that, but at the same token, I feel like there's a really good shot here.
Yeah,
I do too.
I agree.
Yeah. But I mean, we're not experts. We don't know. And I get it. There is only one shot. Are you going to get that last piece of evidence? And maybe there's more being held close to the vest, that they're close to getting that last piece that could really like solidify it,
I think one of the issues right now is the timeline, because I really feel like they still don't know where Bob was. And I think that's evident because I feel like if they had known what time he left the Burger King, there would have been more investigation into other locations he went to. Like, we'd have more information here, but the fact that we don't leads me to believe that there's still that chunk of time that they don't know where he is.
Yeah.
And I think it's also the fact that because it's possible she could have left and potentially left on her, own accord, technically.
Yeah, right. But
yeah, you know what I'm saying? But like,
yeah,
they can't not confirm that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But this is interesting. So murder cases without a body actually have a high conviction rate, around 86%.
Really?
Yes.
I've always heard the opposite.
Yeah, and that is not necessarily true.
You always hear no body, no crime.
So I'm getting this information from a really interesting site I came across called nobodycases.com. And this was started by an assistant United States attorney in the District of Columbia who prosecuted homicide cases for almost 12 years. And he's now a consultant specifically for no body cases. His name is Tad DiBiase, and he did some research on no body cases. So the statistic I was just talking about comes directly from him, that 86% conviction rate for no body cases, which is higher than the national average of about 70% for murder cases with bodies, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. I mean, what do you think about that? The fact that through his research, he found that when no body murder cases go to trial, they have a high conviction rate around 86%. By comparison, the national conviction rate for all murder cases is 70%.
It's interesting because I've always heard the opposite, and I've seen so many cases with no bodies, go to trial and not be able to get a conviction. But obviously, I don't know about every single case. He's actually got a whole compilation of cases that he's consulted on, I believe, that's like over 500 different cases, and you can go through and actually see the outcomes from these no body cases. He would be a really interesting guest to have on. I wonder if he'd be interested.
Yeah,
I'd
he
love
would
to
be
know
really
more
interesting to
about
talk about.
his research in this.
Yeah.
Wow.
So to me,
that's very hopeful.
it is very hopeful, and it makes me wonder, like, what are they waiting for at this point? Because it's like we have, I think the other component is too, other than the cat hair, they don't have any way to link Patti to the truck.
But that's a huge thing. We
It
know
is.
that
It's
she
very specific.
How
yeah.
else does her cat's hair get into his
Right.
truck? She was holding the cats that day.
Yeah, they went
boarding
together
them.
to board them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's very compelling. And just all the other evidence leading up to it and him telling her to get in it and buying that. I mean, there's just so much.
Well, I think the issue is what, like what charges do you seek? Do you seek first degree murder?
Yeah. Well,
and
the more you
potentially
go for,
lose, or do
right.
you go like what, manslaughter? Like, because we don't have enough evidence to evaluate the manner of death here.
Yeah.
And what type of homicide it was. I think that's what makes it difficult, because if they go too high and go for first degree murder and there's not enough evidence, then that's it. You know what I mean? Versus, because for all we know, like the theory you mentioned earlier, it could have went down like that. Potentially could have been, maybe he never was able to execute his full plan that he had of taking her out of the country to this remote cabin that he had. And that's where he was going to murder her. And maybe she died before they even made it out of town because she was under the tonneau cover and he didn't think through,
or maybe the plan
how that would have been. Yeah, we just don't know.
Yeah. There's so many possibilities of what he could have been thinking or planning, or maybe there wasn't even a plan to kill her. I mean, we truly don't know. Like I said, I definitely lean towards this being premeditated. But I hope Detective Stiers, when he says that they want one more piece of evidence, I hope that's not just like a shot in the dark type thing, just like hoping something pops up and that maybe they've got something that could potentially.
Yeah, well, time's not on their side at this point.
I know.
And likely the evidence, the physical evidence that could potentially exist is likely long gone at this point. So it's true. Like, what are you waiting for?
Well, it could be trying to get a witness to get on board and speak, or, I don't know. I hope that that's the case.
I really think and this is just speculation, no police have said this, but I also think they're worried about the jury, simply because in Patti's case, like, she was knowingly engaging in an extramarital affair. And, as we saw with Prisma not too long ago, like, clearly the public has a pretty skewed perception towards that. And I think they're worried that without, distinct evidence, without a body that like links Bob with her murder, they're worried that story might overtake the case. And then, just because they see her already as a mistress.
Yep, that's a great point. And I even saw quite a few comments on that last episode of our own audience members victim shaming her as well. So, I mean, I think people, somehow think that justifies what happens to people. It's pretty wild, but that certainly could be part of the issue as well. But we so deeply hope that there is justice for Patti Adkins and for her family, for her daughter, for her sisters, to finally get to those answers that they so desperately, I'm sure, want, and to see someone actually be held accountable. It's frustrating that this guy's name, I mean, it's out there, but, can't even say it, and can't even say for sure if the name that is out there is actually him. But for him to have just basically been living scot-free ever since
for years now
is God, it's just such a disgrace. But
20 plus years he's been living. Yeah, it was interesting. Their True Crime Daily, one of their reporters actually went up to this unnamed, or Bob's, house and actually made contact with him. And they asked him, like, we want to talk to you about Patti, and he's just like, he's just like, I have nothing to say about that, speak to my attorney, basically. So he's lawyered up and refuses to talk to anybody. But
well, I hope the idea of being found guilty eventually, and just what happened to him or what he has done, just haunts him every day of his miserable life. Because personally, I feel very, very confident that this was his doing. But anyway, Patti Adkins, like we said, has been missing since June 29th, 2001. She was last seen wearing her white Honda of America work shirt. She would now be 52 years old. And if you have any information regarding the disappearance and potential murder of Patti Adkins, any of that possible last evidence that they're looking for, leave a tip at 614-461-8477 or online at stopcrime.org. Or you can also contact Detective Stiers directly at 937-645-4101, extension 4442. But that is going to be it for us today. You guys, we definitely want to hear your thoughts on this case. Just horribly sad. I really just feel so terrible for her daughter. I can't imagine having to go through most of your life without your mother. It's just so beyond tragic.
I'm rooting for the authorities here that they can get this one wrapped up, and
I do too,
and get the man responsible behind bars, because it seems like it's just right there.
Yeah,
they're just so
it's
close
like
to
so obvious. They
to
just
putting
need
it to fully
the
together.
missing pieces.
I know. Yeah.
But that is going to be it for us today, guys. We will be back next week with another episode for you. But until then,
keep on taking your mind a mile higher.